Under the full moon. A werewolf's awakening. The full moon hung low in the night sky, a silver coin nestled in a bed of stars. Its light filtered through the tall pines, casting an otherworldly glow over the forest floor. For 16 years, I had been warned, scolded, and outright forbidden from ever stepping outside on a night like this. My parents' rules were ironclad, their fear palpable, but tonight, curiosity gnawed at me like an itch I couldn't scratch. I waited until they were asleep, their even breaths a rhythmic reassurance from the other side of the wall. My room was dimly lit by the pale glow of the moon spilling through the gap in my curtains. The sight of it made my heart race. All those years of stories, of dire warnings about the dangers of the full moon, seemed to bubble up in my mind. But I was 16 now, old enough to make my own decisions, or so I told myself. With trembling hands, I pulled on my boots, grabbed my flashlight, and tiptoed to the front door. The old hinges creaked, and I froze, heart hammering in my chest. But no one stirred. I slipped outside, closing the door softly behind me. The air was crisp, biting my cheeks as I made my way toward the forest. The pine trees loomed ahead, their dark silhouettes swaying gently in the wind. The closer I got, the louder my doubts became. What if my parents were right? What if there was something dangerous out here? I shook my head, steeling my resolve. It was just a forest, just a moon. What could possibly happen? The forest welcomed me with a symphony of rustling leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. My flashlight's beam danced over the trees, illuminating patches of moss and the gnarled roots snaking across the ground. I wandered deeper, drawn by an inexplicable urge to see the moon unobstructed. It felt like it was calling to me, whispering secrets only I could hear. I found a clearing bathed in moonlight, the trees forming a natural circle around it. The air was still, the silence almost reverent. I tilted my head back, letting the moonlight wash over me. It was beautiful, mesmerizing. And then, it happened. A searing pain ripped through my body, starting at my chest and spreading outward. I doubled over, clutching my stomach as the flashlight clattered to the ground. My breathing came in ragged gasps, my vision blurring. The pain was like nothing I'd ever felt, as if my very bones were shifting, breaking, and reforming. I tried to scream, but the sound that escaped my throat was a guttural growl. My fingers elongated, nails sharpening into claws. Panic surged through me as I watched coarse fur sprout along my arms, spreading to my hands and legs. My clothes tore at the seams as my body contorted, growing larger and more powerful. The world around me sharpened, every sound, every scent amplified. I could hear the distant rustle of a rabbit in the underbrush, smell the rich, earthy aroma of the forest floor. The fear I'd felt moments ago was replaced by an intoxicating sense of power. I threw my head back, letting out a howl that echoed through the trees. I was a wolf. No, a werewolf. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. My parents had known. That's why they'd kept me inside, why they'd told me stories about the dangers of the full moon. But they hadn't told me the whole truth. They hadn't told me this was me. The forest seemed different now, more alive. I could feel it thrumming beneath my paws as I paced the clearing, testing my new form. My senses were sharper, my instincts primal. A rustling in the bushes caught my attention, and before I knew it, I was chasing a deer, the thrill of the hunt coursing through my veins. I didn't catch it. Some part of me, the human part, held back, unwilling to cross that line. But the chase was enough to make me realize just how much had changed. I wasn't just a girl sneaking out on a forbidden night. I was something else entirely. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time felt strange in this form, fluid and unimportant. Eventually, the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, and I felt the change begin again. The pain was just as intense, my body shrinking, fur receding. When it was over, I was lying in the clearing, naked and trembling, my torn clothes scattered around me. I scrambled to my feet, gathering what remained of my clothing to cover myself. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: fear, excitement, confusion. I had to get home before my parents woke up. When I reached the house, the first rays of sunlight were peeking through the trees. I slipped inside, grateful that the door didn't creak this time. My room was just as I'd left it, a sanctuary of normalcy in a night that had been anything but. I climbed into bed, my body aching, and closed my eyes. Sleep didn't come. My mind was too full of questions. Why hadn't they told me? Was this some family curse, or was I the only one? And most importantly, what did this mean for the rest of my life? The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices downstairs. My parents were arguing, their words muffled but urgent. I crept to the top of the stairs, straining to hear. "She's 16 now, Greg. We can't keep this from her forever," my mom said, her voice tight with worry. "She's not ready," my dad replied. "If she finds out, She'll what? Run away? Hurt someone? She needs to know what she is, Greg. She needs to know how to control it." Control it! The words sent a chill down my spine. They knew. They had always known. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I descended the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. They turned to look at me, their faces a mix of surprise and guilt. "I went out last night," I said, my voice trembling. "I saw the moon. I changed." My mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. My dad's expression hardened, his jaw clenching. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," he said. "Why?" I demanded. "Why didn't you tell me?" They exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, my mom spoke. "We wanted to protect you. It's not an easy life being what you are. We thought, if we could keep you from changing, maybe you wouldn't have to face it." "But I did change," I said, "and now I need to know what that means." They sat me down and told me everything about the family lineage, the curse, or gift, depending on how you looked at it, about the dangers of losing control, of letting the wolf take over completely. They promised to teach me, to help me understand and manage this new part of myself. But their promises rang hollow. I couldn't shake the anger bubbling inside me. They had lied to me for 16 years, hidden the truth about who I was. How could I trust them now? They had robbed me of the chance to understand myself, to prepare for what was coming. I felt like a stranger in my own home, in my own skin. That night, as the moon rose high in the sky, I packed a bag. Just the essentials: clothes, a flashlight, some food. I left a note on my pillow, my handwriting shaky but determined. I need answers. I need to find others like me. Don't try to stop me. The forest was waiting for me, its shadows welcoming me back. I knew there had to be others out there, other werewolves who could help me understand what I was, who I was. My parents' warnings about the dangers of the world felt distant now. I was the danger. I slipped into the night, the scent of pine and earth filling my senses. The moonlight guided my path, and for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt free. I would find my own way, my own pack, and when I did, I'd finally understand what it meant to be a werewolf. The world was vast and wild, and so was I. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the trees thickened, their towering forms blocking out most of the moonlight. The air grew cooler, almost unnaturally so, and a strange hum seemed to pulse through the ground beneath my feet. This wasn't an ordinary part of the woods. It felt enchanted, alive in a way that made my skin prickle. The sensation of being watched crept over me, and I froze, scanning the shadows. My heart thundered in my chest as a low growl echoed through the trees. I turned slowly, my breath hitching as two glowing amber eyes emerged from the darkness. A massive wolf stepped into the clearing, its fur as dark as the night itself. Its sheer size dwarfed any wolf I'd ever seen, even in my own transformed state. This wasn't just a wolf. It was an alpha. I stumbled back, my instincts screaming at me to run, but my legs refused to move. The wolf advanced, each step deliberate and measured. Its gaze pinned me in place, and for a moment, I felt an inexplicable connection, a pull deep in my chest, as if some unseen thread tied us together. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The wolf didn't answer, of course, but its growl softened, almost as if it understood me. It circled me, its eyes never leaving mine. The air between us crackled with energy, and I realized with a jolt what this was. This wasn't just an alpha wolf. This was my mate. The realization hit me like a thunderclap, and a wave of emotions surged through me: fear, confusion, anger. How could this be happening now, when I was barely beginning to understand myself? I clenched my fists, determined not to let this overwhelming presence dictate my fate. "Stay back," I said, my voice firmer this time. But the wolf only tilted its head, as if amused by my defiance. Before I could react, it lunged, not to attack, but to pin me to the ground. Its weight was immense, and its breath was hot against my face. I struggled, my human strength no match for its sheer power. But instead of fear, a strange sense of calm washed over me. Its eyes bore into mine, and I felt a flood of emotions that weren't my own: curiosity, protectiveness, and something deeper, something primal. The wolf stepped back, releasing me, and before my eyes, its form began to shimmer. The fur receded, its limbs shortening and shifting until a young man stood where the wolf had been. His hair was dark and unruly, his amber eyes glowing with a familiar intensity. Muscles rippled under his tanned skin, and he exuded an aura of power that made my breath catch. "You," he said softly, his voice deep and smooth. "You're mine." Before I could respond, he closed the distance between us and cupped my face in his hands. His touch was warm, his gaze piercing. And then, without warning, he kissed me. It was my first kiss, and it was everything: soft and fierce, tender and electrifying. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us under the enchanted forest's canopy. When he pulled back, his lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Now," he said, "let's find out what fate has in store for us." And with that, my journey truly began.